today to tell you the backstory actually, on how I began my path to become a nature aware. So, just to be quick about the background of what nature aware is, it's not just seeing nature and taking pretty pictures, but it's understanding your place in nature. And how I became, well, not became, but what pushed me along becoming nature aware is actually kind of a horrific story. And if you're a sensitive viewer and you're sensitive about things that relate to animal cruelty or animals getting injured or killed, you probably don't want to watch this, because that's really what this is all about. So it was about 20 years ago, and I was a security chief up in a remote vacation mountain trailer park in Washington State, and I had been a animal control officer before that, and made the change because my health started to change at the time. I didn't know what was going on, but I was starting to have vertigo attacks and ringing in my ears. And that would actually lead to a diagnosis that same year of Meniere's disease, which is a debilitating disease, and eventually would make me mostly deaf. And while I was working up in this mountain community up at the North Fork of the Nooksack River up near Mount Baker in Washington State, we would have anywhere from 2,000 people on site. When it was really busy, we could have more than that. And at the end of the summer, so going into the fall, this time of year, that would drop down to a couple hundred people staying on site, because there wasn't supposed to be any permanent residents. So nobody was supposed to live there actually on a permanent basis. And at that starts to change. So coming into September, it goes from being really hot and dry, and it becomes more rainy and a little bit cooler. And there's, just kind of a big change for the whole season that goes into the autumn, the fall season. And as that started to happen and people started to leave after having been there for the summer, we received a report at the security office of a bear sighting. Now, bears live in that area. The North Fork of the Nooksack River is bear territory, and we're talking black bears, not grizzly bears. So it's not unheard of, but of course, this being a semi-residential area, it began to make people nervous. And the first report we got wasn't verifiable because nobody had a picture, nobody saw it, and next thing we knew, there wasn't another report for a couple of days. And then suddenly we started to get more and more reports, and I was working one day up at the security office, and a resident or a guest, called on the radio and said, "Hey, I've got a bear on my property." And yeah, so I hop into a 4x4 and drive up there, and back to the back of the property, and I'm talking to the owner of this mobile trailer, and I'm like, yeah, "Can you describe the bear?" And he's like, "Well, if you turn around, he's right behind you." I was like, "Oh shit!" Right? So I turn around, and they're maybe about 30 feet from me, standing up, I should say, against a tree and pulling on a bird feeder that was full of seed, was this big black bear. And the black bear, actually, it's a little bit of a misnomer. It was definitely a male. I mean, this thing was big, and its fur was not completely black. It was blackish brown, so it had this menacing, grisly look to it. And I'll admit, I was very afraid. So I'm pushing on the trailer owner to get into his trailer, and I'm like, "Stay in your trailer, close the door." And I'm backing up to my rig, to my truck. And the thing is, the bear doesn't care, and the bear is eating birdseed, doesn't give a flying fart that we're standing out there. It's a big bear. And as we meet up with the other officer, I say, "Yeah, there's this big black bear, and it's hanging out at this one trailer." And he says, "Oh, okay," and I said, "Listen, let's just keep everybody away from here, and just make sure the owner is okay. And then later on, we'll call the Fish and Wildlife, to come take a look." And that's exactly what happened. So the following day, we had a meeting with Fish and Wildlife officers, the state Fish and Wildlife officers, and we told them about the sightings, and I told them about what I saw and the size of the bear. And they made a plan at that point to try to live capture the bear to relocate it. But also at the same time, they went into uh, kind of a mode of doing more humane measures. So they called up an organization called the Grizzly Bear Outreach Project. And the Grizzly Bear Outreach Project was a phenomenal group of people in the North Cascades that were trying to reintroduce the grizzly bear to what had been their home range. And so they came out and they actually had a three-way meeting with us. So we had the fish and wildlife officers from the state, we had the conservation people, and then we had myself and the security and the property manager for the residential property out there. And we came up with a plan to document and do a very casual live capture situation. So they got these large metal culvert traps, these like cylinders made out of reinforced corrugated metal, and with a spring hatch on it, and then the backside is completely enclosed, and it comes on a trailer, and they put a ramp down, and basically inside the culvert trap they started to place foods, mostly donuts, because bears like donuts, right? So it seemed like a good plan, and every couple of days they would check the trap to see if it had been sprung. They would check to see if there were signs of the bear. We were still getting residents that were making reports of seeing the bear, so we knew it was still on property. And the back of the property was directly on the North Fork and Nooksack River, so I mean it was bear territory. And then after a couple of days, I had my time off, my normal weekend, and I came back and I found out that one of my security officers, who the guy was like Barney Fife from the Andy Griffith Show from a long time ago. He was this little drink of water of a man who carried a concealed weapon, a 9mm pistol. And while he was on shift one night, he thought he saw the bear, and he claims to have shot it 5 times with his 9mm. And that was very unfortunate. It was a very unfortunate catalyst, whether he actually hit it or not, because it changed the paradigm. It changed the situation for the state officers at that point. Now had a fear for public safety. And so they made a choice that the conservation group, the Grizzly Bear Outreach Project, really didn't agree with. And I, at the time, didn't really side with it either. But they started to bring in dogs, tracking dogs, to try to tree the bear, which is they let the dogs run after the bear. The bear gets scared, it climbs up a tree. They shoot a tranquilizing dart, and the bear falls to the ground. They pick it up and they remove it. And it's very hazardous on many levels, and then that would actually bear out immediately. So the first time they tracked the bear and they got the bear into a small clearing with trees around, they let the dogs loose on it, and the bear turned around, killed the dogs, flat out killed the dogs. And that made the whole situation go from a capture and remove situation to a must be killed situation. And the wildlife officers were not equipped that day to down the bear, to kill the bear. But again, it's being Washington State. There's a lot of residents that were weapon owners and rifle owners, and we had one guy, a retired guy on property, who had a 20 gauge shotgun, and he was packing slugs. And he was out for a walk one night with his dog. He saw the bear across the street, and he put 2 slugs into the bear, shot it 2 times, and he said he actually saw the bear roll over and blood everywhere. The problem is the bear got back up and ran away. I mean, this was a big, giant bear. And then the news descended on us. I had the Bellingham Herald, the Whatcom Independent, the weekly newspapers, the local Maple Falls newspaper. I mean, we had news showing up, camera trucks at the front gate of the security office, and everybody wanted to know what was happening with this wild bear that was now wounded and angry and running around. And through this whole situation, I really started to examine my thought process on this, because when I saw the bear, I was absolutely terrified. I was really afraid of it, but at the same time, it was not doing anything particularly harmful. It was really just eating the birdseed, which is the fault of the owners of the trailer for keeping birdseed um, available, which is a bear attracting thing. They love birdseed. They love barbecue pits. If you don't clean out a barbecue pit, the bear is going to show up. So this is really like a human problem, and it didn't go away like on the news cycle. It stayed at a high tempo for about a month. It almost cost me my job, and it cost the job of the security officer that shot the bear with a 9mm pistol. But at the end of the day, I had to make a real choice because it was likely to happen again. And and if you're wondering what happened to the bear, nobody knows. The blood trail ended. The bear was never found. The carcass was never found. It could have crossed the river and died. It could have gone away and healed. Nobody knows what happened. It was definitely wounded. The amount of blood was quantitative. I mean, it's just a lot. And after that, because it was such an unnecessary action, it was such an unnecessary trauma, such an unnecessary amount of violence against an animal that lives in that area, that it's like their home range. Yeah, that's what germinated the seeds in my brain to start writing the book called Nature Aware. And I wrote the book, I finished the book a few years later and published it, self-published, and it did pretty good. You know, like as far as people reading it, I had 10,000 readers on it. And nature, no matter what circumstance we're in, we live in and among nature always. We're a part of that, and we have to find a way to coexist with it. There are coming on 8 billion people on this planet, and we're losing by. And basically, it's on us to stay nature aware. That's the backstory. Thank you for joining me. And please like, subscribe. There's a lot of videos on here that go into the philosophy of nature where everything is original content. I'm not a stealer. I don't take from other people's footage or video and pictures. It's all mine. I mean, I've been a wildlife photographer and a documentary filmmaker for years. So please like and subscribe, follow me. I appreciate your time. Thank you for being here.